Funding for this edition of State of Affairs with Steve Adubato has been provided by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Holy name. This place is different. NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, here when you need us most, now and always. The New Jersey Education Association. PNC, Grow Up Great. Georgian Court University. MD Advantage Insurance Company. And by New Jersey Sharing Network. Promotional support provided by NJ.com, keeping communities informed and connected. And by ROINJ, informing and connecting businesses in New Jersey.
Hi, folks. This is Steve Adubato, and this is State of Affairs right here on News 12 Plus. I'm joined by my colleague, Jackie Tricarico, the executive producer of our other series here on News 12 Plus, Think Tank, which airs every Sunday morning, 10:30, right, Jackie?
10:30 a.m. every Sunday, yeah.
Let's set up this show. People are about to see several people. Jim Kirkos, who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the Meadowlands Chamber. Tara Dowdell, who is a Democratic political operative and consultant. But the one I want to focus on is Dr. Richard Besser, head of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the former acting head of the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. What did you take away from Dr. Besser?
I mean, it was just so amazing to hear from a former CDC acting director about what's going on right now with this pandemic, right? And the overall messaging coming out of the CDC. It's been a challenge for them, and we've seen it across the board. But his argument was, hey, the information is changing constantly. What you hear even a couple hours ago about mask mandates or vaccines, things are just constantly evolving. And I think the biggest takeaway from me was to just constantly be reading up on all the information, get as much information as we can on a regular basis to make the most informed decisions for ourselves and our families.
You know, Jackie, for people who say, why can't the CDC, why can't the so-called government experts just be consistent? Dr. Besser was saying, you want us to be consistent, but the science is changing. The information is new, and so you have to evolve. So for people who are frustrated by that, what would you say to them?
Again, I think it's just we've seen it firsthand, right? We've seen how quickly things can change, how quickly a new variant can pop up, and it's in South Africa, but then it's here, a blink of an eye later. So I think it's just important that we continue to get as much information as we can. And I think at the end, Dr. Besser really made me feel like, hey, you know what? We might be finally turning that corner now. We're getting close to having some kind of herd immunity, or just things are starting to look up a little bit. So I'm going to continue to cross my fingers, and Dr. Besser definitely made me feel good about that going into February and March right now.
Yeah, and by the way, we're taping this February 7th, be seen after that. So things are evolving. Jackie and I just said that. I want to thank our colleague, Jackie Tricarico, who is the executive producer of Think Tank. This is State of Affairs, and this is News 12 Plus. Check it out. Hey, everyone, I'm Steve Adubato. We kick off the show. Look, he's got all kinds of promotion behind him. It's Jim Kirkos, who is the president and CEO of Meadowlands Chamber. Hold on, Jim. Before we get into this, first let me say you're a trustee of the Caucus Educational Corporation. What's all the promotional stuff going on behind you?
Well, I am coming to you live from our visitor center here at what I call the MCHQ in Lyndhurst. And in our visitor center, we're promoting all the destination assets and attractions to the region. That's what we do.
Well, let me ask you this. For years, we talked about American Dream. We actually taped a half-hour special from American Dream connected to the New Jersey Sharing Networks. They had the transplant games there, which was awesome. And I know you're very involved with the Sharing Network as well. But here's the thing. I'm sitting there going, Kirkos is now talking about a convention center. We're going to show some aerial shots, but seriously, Jim?
Yeah, seriously.
A convention center? Explain that market, which I don't get.
Okay, so when you think about the Meadowlands Sports and Entertainment Complex and the assets that are already there, right? Think about the millions and now billions of dollars that have been invested in a brand new stadium and a brand new racetrack and an American dream. And so when you think about the marketplace in the future and how we can leverage the sports complex to be what it was, 30 years ago when they first built the track, the arena, and the original Giant Stadium, we have an opportunity here to add an element of a destination asset like a convention center that's multi-use. Now, the real key here is the multi-use, multi-purpose. Youth and amateur sports, events, conventions, meetings, conferences, all of those types of things to come to the sports complex, fill our hotel rooms in the entire North Jersey region, and then support the assets that have already been invested in the stadium, the track, and now American Dream.
You're bullish on this, Jim.
Oh, I'm very bullish on it, and I think what we'll talk about a little bit today, hopefully, is some of the results of the phase one market analysis. We've conducted a study by a national reputable firm about whether this is. Don't take it from me. Let's hear.
What do they say? Tell us what they say.
Yeah, in short, the experts said every box that needed to be checked relative to the marketability and the success of a facility like this has been checked. That's what they came back with. Now we're about to do a phase two study that shows all the economics. What's the economic impact? What's the cost to build it? How do we get there?
Does it look at traffic and environmental issues too, Jim?
It's not going to go as deep into traffic and environmental, but listen, the facility is already built, right? There's an arena on that site where we're proposing the convention center to be, and the arena is this much economic impact, and a convention center impact is a mile high. And so why would we not want to leverage everything we can for the North Jersey region, especially coming out of the pandemic where hospitality and local businesses have suffered the most? Why wouldn't we want to think about how to leverage that going forward for the next 15 or 20 years?
So let's talk about it, Jim. We're going into the spring. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're getting close to the spring 2022, 2 years plus into the pandemic. How badly have most of the businesses at the chamber suffered, and specifically how?
You know what, Steve? There's a real dichotomy because there's certain industry sectors of the chamber whose members didn't feel much negative impact at all. Construction, certain elements of commercial real estate, and so forth. What was hurt was predominantly hospitality. That hotel sector, restaurants, dining, attractions, all the kinds of places that have been shuttered. Main Street businesses, those are the businesses that have been hurt the most. And so a project like this really provides some long-term relief, not only in terms of recovery, but another source of energy and business potential to all these types of businesses in the future.
Jim, obviously we have a big audience in New York. Our partners at WNET Group, PS, watch Metro Focus every night, WNET, and the public television stations NJPBS, as well as NJ Spotlight News. I will not plug any more than that. But the reason I bring up New York, Jim, is you got the Javits Center over on the west side. You got a bunch of activity going there. New York, New Jersey, this battle going on forever. You really believe we're going to compete effectively against what's going on in Manhattan?
So let me explain to you what the study showed, right? And this is not me. This is not Jim Kirkos, the champion of the region talking. This is the private entity that's meant to do this in the study. The market analysis showed that the New York metropolitan area, including the Jacob Javits Center and its renovation that it recently went through, adding significant amount of space, is still short by almost 1 million square feet of exhibition space as compared to the top 15 other markets around the country.
What does that mean?
That means even if we built a 400 or 500,000 square foot facility in our marketplace, the New York metropolitan region is still short exhibition space. So that means we're not really going to compete with Javits. A 500,000 square foot facility, and the one that we propose is 460. It doesn't compete with Jacob Javits Center. It's a certain element of shows that are going to come to us that are not going to go there. We complement the Jacob Javits Center. We complement New York. But more importantly, and listen, my job is not to worry about New York. My job is to worry about New Jersey, the northern New Jersey, the greater Meadowlands area. This is a tremendous boon.
I hear. Before I let you go, American Dream, there's still news reports that talk about the fact that it's going to struggle. It's challenging. The economics are challenging. What's your sense of where it is and where it's going to be in the next couple of years?
Here's the gauge and the barometer that I use. There's no doubt that they've been harmed irreparably by the pandemic, right? Their ability to make the bond payments. They, all the news recently of them making a bond payment and tapping all of their reserves. But here's where I remain optimistic. Every time I go into the place, it's packed. I see people in every element of the entire space. People are shopping. They got bags with them. They're not just walking around. They're having fun. They're enjoying. They're in the water park. They're in the Sea Life Aquarium. They're on the ice skating rink. They're using the facility. Their ability to attract people is strong, and that's why I remain optimistic.
Jim Kirkos called himself the champion of the Meadowlands region, and no one is going to debate that. Even you got WrestleMania. I'll leave that alone. Hey, Jim, thank you, my friend. Again, a trustee of the Caucus Educational Corporation, and it's always good to talk to you, Jim. All the best.
Thanks for having me. See you soon.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Hi, I'm Joe Roth. In New Jersey, there are nearly 4,000 residents in need of a life-saving organ transplant, and one person dies every 3 days waiting for this gift of life. One organ and tissue donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of over 75 people. You have the power to make a difference and give hope. For information or to become an organ and tissue donor, visit www.njsharingnetwork.org and be sure to talk with your family and friends about this life-saving decision.
We are pleased to once again have our good friend Tara Dowdell, who's the founder and president of TDG Speakers and the Tara Dowdell Group, and then she's also a Democratic consultant. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about this. 2022, a huge year for a lot of reasons. Because, lay it out politically, what's at stake?
Well, it's a big year. I mean, President Biden's agenda is already struggling a bit, particularly his agenda around Build Back Better, that specific marquee piece of legislation that he's been trying to get passed. So this is a big year because he's already facing some stumbling blocks around his agenda. And so then if he were to have to contend with a Republican Congress, a Republican House, a Republican Senate, it would clearly make things even worse, given the fact that they are lockstep en masse blocking almost everything he does, with some exceptions like Liz Cheney and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Those two representatives have been more amenable to working with him. But by and large, the Republicans under Mitch McConnell have said yet again, we're not going to do anything that involves collaboration.
So let's try this. You understand the Democratic Party better than most. You're a Democratic consultant. You've been involved in a lot of campaigns. But I'm curious about this. The Democrats are divided in a lot of ways. We just actually had an interview with the former Senate President Steve Sweeney, and he talked about the so-called AOC wing of the party, very liberal progressive wing of the party, and the more moderate wing of the party. Incredibly divided on issues. Fair to say?
So I've
forget
always
about the Republicans for a second. Just forget about the Republicans. Just the Democrats. Divided.
So I don't think that the Democrats are as divided as other people think they are. And so with all respect to Senator Sweeney, because around the big ticket items, there's a lot of agreement. And so I don't identify with that as much. And I think that the messaging needs to be more coordinated for sure. I think there's an issue there. There's a disconnect there. But I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that all of the Democrats support have massive public support. And so especially when you look at them individually, and we saw this exact same dynamic when Obama was president. The exact same dynamic played out where the policies were popular, but there was a disconnect in the public perception around when it was a large-scale piece of legislation.
But Tara, let me push back on this. President Obama, as a student of leadership on my end, when I studied President Obama, one of the things he had was the ability to connect with people on a human, personal level, an extraordinary public communicator. Is it not fair to say that President Biden is struggling mightily to connect with people and communicate a clear, coherent message, and frankly, some would argue, communicate with a sense of confidence when he is out there? Or is that just what those who don't like him are saying?
No, there's literally no better communicator within the Democratic Party than President Obama. I would still say he's probably, well, actually, there's one better communicator, Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We're on the same page. So Michelle Obama is the single best communicator in the Democratic Party, and number two is probably President Barack Obama. But Biden's approval ratings are only 4 points lower than where President Obama's approval ratings were at this exact same time. And I think people are underestimating this pandemic. I think they're underestimating the mass trauma that many people will realize they have after we get through this. I think the country is divided. A lot of people know we want out of this pandemic. There are 30, if you ask 30 different people, you get 30 different answers as to what we should be doing. And I think that a big part of what is putting an albatross around the neck of the Democratic Party is this pandemic. I have friends, I don't have children myself, but the frustration from parents, and it swings in both directions. And it really, honestly, I know Democratic parents that skew very differently. It doesn't matter whether they're the far left, the far, moderate. None of that matters. The parents I know parents who are both, and this is anecdotal, obviously, right? But I know parents who are more progressive who want their kids back in school. And I know parents who are more moderate who don't want their kids back in school. And so I don't envy anybody governing at this time, but I do think that a lot of things have been sort of projected onto the Democratic Party, and a lot of it is grounded in this pandemic and the trauma that people are facing and the disruption that they continue to face in their lives.
Tara, put in perspective, again, the graphic democracy at a crossroads will come up because this is a huge issue as it relates to our democracy. Voting rights. As we speak at the end of January, this will be seen a little bit after, it looks like it's not happening as many would want it to happen. I can't even imagine what the late, great Congressman John Lewis would be thinking right now, Dr. King would be thinking right now. Say it doesn't happen. Say these changes are taking place in a variety of states across the nation, which is going to make it harder, as many say, for many people, disproportionately black and brown, to vote. It's not my job to editorialize. It's your job to help us understand why voting rights matter so much, A, and B, if it does not take place, what does that mean for our democracy?
And I think, so this is what I think is the biggest threat to our democracy. And I would also add, we need publicly financed elections, but that's for another conversation for another time. But I would say that this is, in fact, the biggest threat. The entire point of an electoral process, one person, one vote, the entire point of that is to give the people the right to hire and fire those people that represent them, to give the people a voice in their democracy. Once you start to impinge upon that, by definition, you are harming democracy. This is what separates us from other countries. This is what separates us from countries that we've offered condemnations towards, countries that we have, in fact, gone to war with, countries that we have imposed sanctions upon. This is the defining factor. If everyone does not have equal access to the ballot box, then we cannot call ourselves a democracy. And once we move down that very slippery slope, which we are well on our way down, then things will, I think, deteriorate on a number of levels beyond, because it's the cornerstone of everything that makes, that comprises this nation's foundations.
Tara, I got 30 seconds left. I say Trump 2024. You say?
I say Ron DeSantis is probably going to have something to say about it. Just say. And I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, if that were to happen again, if he were to run again and potentially win again, what do you believe that would mean for this nation, particularly for people of color? Well, I think he is going to run again. Unless something changes, I think he's definitely going to run again. I think that it will be horrible. Trump wanted to do a blacks versus whites episode of The Apprentice. Season of The Apprentice. That was something he wanted to do. He has been dividing people by race forever. This is not new. Central Park 5, and he will continue to do it because it benefits him.
Donald Trump took out ads saying about the Central Park 5. Later, they were exonerated based on DNA evidence. But at the time, he said, guilty, do what has to be done with those teenagers. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
He said it after they were exonerated. After they were exonerated by DNA evidence, he has yet to acknowledge that. He is someone who is an opportunist, and whatever he can do to leverage himself, he will do. And for him, race, he tapped into what he saw in the Republican Party. He saw that race was a central focus in the Republican Party, and he sought to exploit it because that's what he does. He taps into things that already exist and leverages them to his benefit.
Hey, Tara, thank you. And we look forward to continuing our discussion with you throughout the remainder of 2022 and listening to your perspective. All the best to you and your family. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
You got it. We'll be right back.
To watch more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now honored to be joined once again by Dr. Richard Besser, President and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Besser is also the former acting head of the CDC. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Hey, listen, we're taping in February, 7th of February, being seen later. You've never tried to predict the future because you're a very smart man. Question, if I were to ask you where you think we're going with this 2 years in plus when it's seen, where do you think?
You know, it's you're right. I try to avoid predicting what happens here, but I do think we're entering a new phase of this, and the reason for that is that because of how contagious the Omicron variant was and the way it spread across the country, I think that most people in our country will have some level of protection around what comes next, and I think there will be things that come next. But my hope is that with each return of the COVID virus, with each subsequent wave, the impact will be less, and we're going to need to disrupt our lives less, and we'll see less in the way of hospitalizations and death. You know, that's my hope, that this is the way into COVID becoming something we live with rather than something we protect ourselves so dramatically against. But that's one of several possible scenarios. I think it's the most likely.
Absolutely. And one of the things, Dr. Besser, one of the areas we focused on in our coverage, and by the way, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is, in fact, a supporter of what we do in terms of our public health and educational programming. I want to be clear on something. One of the areas we focused on heavily is racial equity, social justice. There's a Rutgers Equity Alliance for Community Health that you and the foundation are very much involved in. One of our trustees, Micheline Davis, very involved as well. What is that, and what does it have to do with racial and social justice as it relates to this pandemic?
Yeah, when you look at the impact of this pandemic on our nation, there's not a single community that hasn't been hit by this and hit hard. It's hard to find anyone that who hasn't lost somebody, a friend, a relative. But when you look at the impact of this pandemic by community, when you look by race, by ethnicity, by income, you see differences. And in particular, in the first year and a half of this pandemic, Black communities, Latino communities, rural communities, lower income communities were hit far harder than other communities. There's recent data looking at the overall impact on longevity in America. And it dropped life expectancy for the average American by 1.6 years. But if you break that down by race, Black and Latino Americans lost 3 years of life, twice that of white Americans. So everyone's been hit hard, but clearly there are disparities in terms of who's been hit the hardest. The project that you lifted up at Rutgers is something that we're very proud about. And what it is it's a desire to work with communities to address the problems that people in communities see. And so it's bringing the expertise, the intellect, the research skills of our state university to our communities and saying, what is it that's challenging you most? Let's work together to solve that. Rather than coming in from above and saying, we know best, saying, no, you know what the solutions are. Let's help achieve those.
Dr. Besser, let me ask you this. You're the former head of the CDC, and I'm a student of communication, a student of trying to communicate clear, effective, credible information. How difficult is it for Dr. Walensky, who is the head of the CDC as we speak? It's not really about her, it's about that position. How difficult is it to communicate accurate, credible information with such a moving, complex, unpredictable, dare I say, target?
Yeah, I think, Stephen, in the best of circumstances, it's incredibly hard. When you come into a position like that and the nation is already polarized, you come into a position like that and there's already massive distrust of public health at the federal, state, and local levels, where public health many times has been lifted up as the enemy. And you're trying to then engender trust. I don't know how you do that and are successful. It's just a monumental task. What I've seen with Dr. Walensky that I really appreciate is that she explains why she's making the decisions that she is, why the CDC is making the recommendations it is, and that's hard. That's hard to understand because
it changes. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead. I'm sorry, but it does change. And people say, "Wait a minute." If you want me to do what you follow the CDC, follow the science, and then 2 weeks later, a month later, it changes, how am I supposed to follow it? You say.
Yeah, the science has changed. We've learned something. So, that's one of the hardest things when you're faced with a new public health threat, is that the science is constantly changing. You're learning more. Right now, our governor is saying that in a month, school mask mandates can come off. Well, it's really important that that's framed in terms of because of what's going on right now, because the numbers are going down. And if we see that change, we may need to come back to you and say, here they are again. Whenever we're removing a public health measure, we have to frame it in the context of we're doing it because of this. And if that changes, we're going to come back and give you the best protection. And that may be that we put these right back in place. You want to set the stage for that because we've seen time and time again during this pandemic that things that have been lifted have had to be reimposed. And people get really, they get annoyed, they get angry, and they lose trust.
And so we're taping on the 7th of February. Say this is seen in April, May. We don't know what it's going to be, but as of now, and I'm going to ask you this real quick before we have to go. Dr. Besser, the polarization you described, the vehement opposition to government mandates about vaccines, masks, et cetera. Do you believe that those who have gotten the vaccine as we speak today will be those who get the vaccine, and this is pretty much it? That those who are resisting, they've resisted?
Yes and no. So I think that's true for hardcore people who have said absolutely not. But right now, what we're seeing in America is a much lower uptake in terms of boosters than in other nations. And I think there's a big group. There's something like 45% of people over 65 have not yet had a booster shot. We know that helps reduce the risk of hospitalization and death. And I think there's room there if we do more outreach to the elderly to get that number much higher, because that's a group that has already accepted vaccines that really should be getting these boosters to further give themselves further protection.
That is Dr. Richard Besser. He's the president of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the former acting director of the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. Dr. Besser, as always, thank you very much. We learn every time you're with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
You got it. I'm Steve Adubato. That is Dr. Besser. We'll see you next time.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Holy Name, NJM Insurance Group, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, the New Jersey Education Association, PNC, Grow Up Great, Georgian Court University, MD Advantage Insurance Company, and by New Jersey Sharing Network. Promotional support provided by NJ.com and by ROINJ.
Hey, Dan. See, you got new homeowners insurance.
Yeah, went with the alpaca. I'm not really sure what it covers, to be honest, but the kids love the mascot, and it's definitely better than the last one.
Seems like an upgrade.
Some insurance companies are known for their mascots. NJM is known for what matters. Outstanding service you can count on.
I was gonna trim those back anyway.
No jingles or mascots, just great insurance. NJM. Get a quote today.